Hello to all the attendees. Good morning, good afternoon. We still have a couple of minutes left before we start the session. So I would request all of you to introduce yourselves. There's a chat box on the screen. So all the attendees, please go ahead and introduce yourselves. Tell us about which country are you joining in from, and also tell us about your company name so that we can get to know you better. Hello, Sims. Good afternoon. So people are joining in from different time zones. It's great and delightful to see so many people. Good afternoon, Dipesh. Hello, Akshay. Hello, Mr. Sanjeev Kumar. Hello, Moses. Great, we have Alex from Singapore. Hi, Alex. Oh, Sims is also from Singapore. Great. Hi, Richa Madan. Hello, Sukan Paul. Ankur Agarwal from PDA Consultants. Hello, good morning, Ankur. Great to see so many people joining in. So we have Martin here with us. Good afternoon, Deepthi. Deepthi is from BP Automation, Kolkata. Hi to you. Hello, Mr. Jitendran. Yeah, we are too delighted to have you here. Hi, Marcus. Marcus is also from Singapore. So a lot of people from Singapore are joining in. Hello, good morning. Hello, Masroor. He's a lighting designer from Dubai. Great. Great to have you here. Oh, wow. There's somebody from Croatia as well. Hello. Hello, Glory from Malaysia. Hello, Akshay Deshmukh. He's from Endo Lighting. So I think in another 2 minutes, we'll begin the session. Also, we have Siddharth from NID, Bangalore. Hello, Siddharth. Hi, Christine. She's from Philippines. Okay, I think we have a lot of attendees now, so we can begin the session. So I'll go on, Martin.
Sure.
I'm going to start now, sure?
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay, so good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I hope all of you are doing well and staying safe. We are extremely delighted to see such a vibrant audience who has joined us from different parts of the world. In the current times of slow economic activity, online sessions have become key platforms for gaining knowledge on respective industries and also getting insights on new concepts that would help us in our businesses and professions in the long run. Keeping that in mind, we bring to you a series of 7 masterclasses by eminent lighting expert Martin Klassen, who is the founder and principal Klassen Lighting Design and Lighting Design of Things. Martin is an award-winning lighting designer, design consultant, lecturer, and a resource speaker with more than 40 years of experience in the lighting industry. Several of his designs have received national and international lighting design awards. His expertise and experience span all applications with projects around the globe, one being Alila Yangshuo Hotel and Resort in China. Martin is also passionate about sharing his knowledge by educating his clients and the public through his public appearances and articles in the media. He is now looking forward to sharing his years of practical lighting experience, design experience, through newly created Light Talk Masterclasses. This amazing opportunity will help all attendees delve deep into the various concepts of lighting design. Today is the introductory session of Light Talks, wherein Martin will take you step by step into the varied aspects of lighting design and will help you explore the possibilities in this domain. More information on upcoming classes will be shared with you during the session. So without further ado, let us begin. Over to you, Martin.
Thank you very much, Sophia, for this introduction. And thanks everybody for tuning in. I'm very touched by seeing so many people having tuned in for this session. So this is an introductory session, sort of a prelude on the 6 modules that I'm going to do afterwards in the coming weeks. And what I wanted to do is share my passion, the challenges, and that's also in the heading of this title, and share specifically my experience. As you mentioned, I have been in this business for more than 40 years now. What I'd like to do is to really share how I experience lighting design and what I have been doing over all these times. I'm doing this over a platform that I have developed over the last 10 years, which I call Light Talk. Some of you have been following my blog over the years, and more recently my vlog. Some of you may even have my books that has the same title. But that platform has been used by me to really share what I do, how I experience lighting. It's never political in nature. It's just the way I handle lighting design in general, what I come across during my job as a lighting designer. And today, with these master classes, I enter a new chapter where I actually do and share that on a more direct basis. And it's a really personal thing. I'm not saying that this is the way to do lighting design. It's just my way of doing things. And over the years, I've always loved sharing, and I think that is only a benefit for everybody. If you understand how people do things, we can educate our clients, we can create a better understanding of what lighting designers do, and I think that will help our profession. So today I want to start with this introductory class or course in which I just look at the role of the lighting designer. What is lighting design? What do I do? First of all, the question I often get asked is whether lighting design is art or science. And I think that if you look at Van Gogh, he is a painter, was a painter, I have to say, but he knew his canvases, he knew his materials, he knew the colors, he knew how to use all that to create something. He has a vision of what he wanted to create, and he does that by means of painting. And I think that we as lighting designers, we use the science of lighting to create artworks in a way as well. In this little sketch on the right-hand side that was produced by my earlier mentor, Eric Caminada, I think it expresses really clearly what a lighting designer does. We take the science of lighting, how light distributes from a lighting point, and we place it into space. We create and manipulate light to create a life into a space. So to me, lighting design is basically using the science of lighting to create beautiful art. So one of the other things that I learned along the way is that there are differences between where you are, which culture you're doing your lighting design. And one of my very early experiences was when I was doing for Philips in my early days when I was still working there. I was asked to do an office lighting design in Pakistan. And I was just following what I was being told, what the international guidelines were in terms of lighting levels, which was at the time 500 lux. And when I came out with my lighting design there, they looked at me like I didn't understand what the real situation was, because in their environment, 50 lux or 100 lux was already a luxury. So for me to come out with a lighting design of 500 lux, sure, it complied with international standards, but it was totally over-designed to what they were used to there. So you really need to understand where you design your lighting for whom, in which country, what's their cultural background, what is their expectation. And a lighting design in that particular case of 250 lux to 300 lux was already seen as a big luxury. So it's important to understand how you apply your lighting knowledge and how you relate it to culture and geographical backgrounds. The same goes for color temperature, for instance. People that live in northern and southern hemispheres have totally different appreciation of colors of light. In tropical countries, people like cooler colors. In northern and southern hemisphere, they look at warmer colors. So there are some cultural expectations in terms of applying lighting and lighting design. So it's important for us to understand that and think of where you're going to apply your project or your lighting design. The same goes for climate and quality. If it's a mountainous resort, you have different situation and different environments than a seaside resort or a seaside location. And again, different again from a city. So it's important to really think about where am I going to do my design and what are the cultural backgrounds of the people that are going to use your lighting in their daily environment. The other element that influences lighting design is the person itself. Am I a creative person? Am I a technical person? There's many different backgrounds. And if I can share with you my personal story, I studied industrial design way back in the 70s in Holland. And when I graduated and I got my master's degree in industrial design, I got several job opportunities. And one of them was an invitation to apply for a job with Philips. And I went there thinking that I would be offered a job in consumer products, things like radios or washing machines, that kind of things, you know, typical consumer products. But interestingly, when I came there, they offered me a position in lighting design, and I had no idea what lighting design was. I thought of designing light bulbs, of perhaps things in theater lighting. I didn't know there was such thing as a professional lighting design profession. But I was taken to that department where they were doing city lighting, stadiums, Olympic Games, hotels. And I was really impressed, and I decided then and there that I would do that job. I said yes on the spot. I even didn't look any further, and that was 40 years ago. So my background is creative, but there's many different backgrounds. People can also have engineering background, which generally probably makes them have a better understanding of technical detailing, more affinity to understanding technology and processes. And some people may be in the marketing and management backgrounds, having a better understanding of economics or business. But what I did find is that it is important to balance the composition of your team. Nobody has all these qualities in one person. It's very seldom that you find somebody with creative engineer management background in one person. So I found that having a team with various backgrounds really helps me to tackle the issues that I'm facing as a lighting designer. But everybody has to start from somewhere. When I left Philips and started my own lighting design company, I was lucky to be proposed a job in Malaysia, which was the Petronas Twin Towers. We had virtually just a startup. The company was just about a year old, but through some relationships that we had, we were offered to do the Petronas Twin Towers as one of the 3 lighting designers that were involved. And I have to say that was for me the break. That was to me, it did put me on the map, and it helped me to start my lighting design profession. But I guess that story for everybody is different. You can have a lucky break in other things. But for me, I started with this Petronas Twin Towers as my big break. And from there, I can only look back where I am today, 40 years, no, in this case, 30 years later. But what I did learn is that I have to learn from my mistakes. I think it's really crucial that you own up to things that you do wrong or things that you could have done better. Too often people just sweep it under the carpet, but I think it's important to look at how you do things, and whether you do it wrong or not, that's how you learn. And life is, I guess, too short to make all the mistakes necessary to grow. So it's also good to learn from others, look at how they are doing things, and perhaps even learn from other people's mistakes. But that's how you grow. And when I started doing my first lighting design on my own, that was still within my Philips team, I got asked by my boss at the time to handle one project by myself, to project manage it. So I thought, okay, let me ask one of the designers, expert designers who had been there for a long time, how he would tackle that project. So he gave me one solution. I said, okay, that's interesting. So I thought, okay, maybe I'd ask somebody else. And I asked the second lighting designer in that team, and he gave me, to my surprise, a totally different solution. And I went to the third one, and he gave me another solution again. So the interesting thing that I learned is that there's not one solution for a lighting design problem. There's many. And you somehow have to find your own identity. You have to make up what you feel is the right thing, because there's not only one solution. And in order to develop yourself, and I guess I've developed my own identity in lighting design by learning from others and making decisions about what I think is right and what I think is the best solution. Now, when you deal lighting design, you also need to deal with clients. And what I also learned is that there's basically 2 types of clients: those who are familiar with the design process, and those that are totally new to the design process. And both can be a blessing or a curse. They can be a blessing because, first of all, if they're familiar with the process, they let you do your thing. They can be a curse because if they know every detail of the process, they can bug you about all those details. Same with the new clients, either they respect you, or because they don't understand, they keep bugging you with questions and they don't understand what you're doing. So the ones that you really want as clients are those that understand the process and respect, most of all, your expertise as a lighting designer. I find that in order to be able to deal with my clients, and not only with my clients, in fact, and with everybody that I deal with in the process of a project, is I need to manage expectations. If I can under-promise and over-deliver, I find my clients to be much happier than that I try to promise the world, promise the moon, and I can't deliver it. So managing expectations of what they can expect from you is really important. Now, the question of what is good lighting design. There's, I guess, different interpretations, but the catchword here is good. You can imagine that some people are satisfied with just a simple car, and some people want a sophisticated car. But in both cases, the thing that is important is whether it brings a measurable benefit. If you've done that, you've done something good. When you keep onto that, it's also important to manage what it will cost, because in the end, everything is about money. That's one of the things that I learned over the course of my many years in this business, is that if I don't understand why a client is not happy or why a client makes a certain decision, it was always related to money. And even till today, if I have any issues with clients, it always boils down to somehow a relation to money. And I think that is something that is worth bearing in mind, because sometimes there's strange decisions made and then you don't understand why they make that decision. But if you think backwards, you nearly always can relate it back to money. Now, in order to give you an impression of what I feel is a lighting designer, what a lighting designer do, what is the role of a lighting designer, I split that in two parts. And this is also the underlying ground for my further modules. I want to give you a feeling of how I think about lighting design, so that when I go into more details about the process of lighting design in my further modules, you at least understand how I think about this and what I think is important as part of a lighting designer's profession. So the visible thing, and I'm actually using pictures that I've been using for years. You can probably tell they're slightly dated, but it still expresses what I want to say. If you look at the top left, you can see that we have a very unbalanced lighting. It lights up the floor, but it doesn't light the rest of the space. And interior designers may have spent a lot of money in putting expensive materials, but it's not expressed by the way lighting is applied. If you look at the top right, you can see there's way too many light fixtures. And even though you may have the proper lighting levels, you may think whether they're actually selling light fixtures or whether it's fashion that they are selling. If you look at the bottom left, you can see that the way they have applied the light fixtures is incorrect. It's not the right fixture to light up a building like that. Not only does it destroy the architectural feel of the building, but it also fails to highlight the signage of the company. And if you look at the bottom right, there's clearly no definition in space. You can't read the signage, people are silhouetted, so there's a lack of balance. So you need to understand how to light and what not to light. In that respect, I also need to highlight one of my favorite things that I always say is that we do not design for lux meters. I always cringe when clients and engineers start to talk about, oh, but we need so many lux here, and can you tell me if you comply with the lux levels? To me, if they start talking like that, they do not understand what lighting design is about, because we don't see lux levels, we see reflections. If we have 100 lux on a black surface, it does look totally different to me than 100 lux on a white surface, because we see reflections. I don't see the lux levels actually. So if you don't understand that principle and you start hammering on about lux levels, I don't think you understand what a lighting designer does. So I always keep repeating to my clients that we don't design for lux meters. You design for people to feel comfortable in space. So in that respect, space means I need to light up horizontal and vertical surfaces. I need to understand how light is intercepted by these spaces, how light is intercepted by a wall. At what point does the light actually hit the wall? How do I aim on surfaces? So that's part and parcel of the architectural lighting. And on the other hand, I have to make sure that people feel comfortable in space, that you can see who's in that space, that they can really see people's emotions, expressions. And in this respect, I always have to think of one of the earlier days when I did some work in stage lighting, because that person that did stage lighting production, just on a community level, it wasn't really high level theater lighting, but I was asked, oh, you're in lighting, can you do some stage lighting? And I thought I had done a beautiful job by lighting the backdrop and the stage really well, but I did it as an architectural lighting, and I forgot that the stage is really about actors, and I had totally missed out on providing proper lighting to see people's expressions and see the actors' facial expressions. So it's a combination of both. You need to be able to put people at ease in terms of how they look in space, and at the same time also manage the lighting of the environment they're in. So this is another expression. If you want to validate space, you have to make sure that the lighting that you put in there is really coordinated. You don't have light that has a scallop that goes half over the door. You need to position that in space that makes sense. You need to follow the rhythm of the building. If one light is out of sync, it looks odd. It means something is wrong and it doesn't look like very coordinated. If I look at these pictures, for instance, the designer obviously did not understand that lighting will hit the wall at a certain level. And if there's artwork on the wall, then this is not the right solution. In case of the one in the middle, you can see that maybe there were plans to have 2 artworks there, and 2 budget cuts, it only became 1. But the point is, it doesn't look coordinated. So your lighting always needs to be coordinated with what's happening in space. Here's another one, and you can tell I've used this many years, but I still think they express what I'm trying to tell you, is that if you have very reflective light surfaces, you have this reflection, and even though you thought it was a nice idea to have these light bulbs on the ceiling, they are being reflected, and it totally destroys the feeling of that space. You can't even determine, you can't really see what that space is all about. And on the right, if you don't understand that there's a bulkhead, it may look good on your plan that you have spaced out your lights, but you need to understand the 3-dimensional aspects of lighting to avoid all these kind of weird lighting effects. It's all about positioning. It's about creating mood. It's about creating that expression that attracts you to that space, whether it is a Maitre d' table for a restaurant, or whether it's a display on a table, or whether it's an artwork. These kind of things, you want to be attracted to it without understanding where the light comes from. It is an integration, a harmonious integration of the lighting in a space that validates that space. And that's what we as lighting designers are requested, or what we should be doing. At least that's what I think we should be doing. This is one of our recent projects in Singapore, the Atlas Bar. One of the keys here is that, I guess you can see my mouse here, there's a suspended element in here that sort of disappears, even though it hangs halfway from the ceiling to the floor. It's done in such a way in terms of material finish that it doesn't oppress, it doesn't feel like it's there. We have tried to make it disappear, because in the end, what it's all about is the feeling of the whole space. So by being able to do that, we were able to bring the lights closer to where we want to have the lights, which is closer to the floor, and create that mood and ambience and that balance that's so important to validate that space. So lighting does not exist by itself. Very often I'm being asked the question, when should a lighting designer be involved in the project? And my standard answer, as always, it's never too early to be involved. If you want to integrate lighting harmoniously, you have to work with the interior designer, you have to work with the architect or the landscape designer, with everybody in the team, to make sure they think and understand what lighting is all about, how lighting is going to be integrated. In this picture, you can see that that's not an afterthought. The architect, interior designer had to make that space to create that lighting in there. So by being involved early, our lighting does not become an add-on or doesn't look like it has been added on later. And one of the things that we always try to pursue with anybody, with any project team once we get on board, is to make sure that we have one-on-one workshops right from the beginning. Do we understand their design brief? Do they understand what can be done by lighting? And the earlier we're involved, the earlier it allows us to also create space and integration of lighting as a complete harmonious process. Light design is also managing the physical aspects of lighting. And I want to run you through a couple of perception laws that some of you may know, some of you may not know. They're called the laws of perception, but they guide how we see things. They were developed by the Bauhaus in, I think it was in the 30s in Germany. They developed a way or described the way how our mind works and how we see things. And if you see those three shapes here, these are not three circles. I think you immediately know what these things are. These are eggs, because the shape and form of these eggs are very defined. We know that, we have seen that. It's already, we fill in the blanks. So when we see that, we automatically think, oh, these are eggs. So there's a couple of laws that apply directly to lighting design and which have always been one of my big tools when I do lighting design. The first one is called the law of continuity. You know, every dot, when you see dots one after another, they automatically look like a line. You, in your mind, you link them together and you see a line. So if you do a design, and I move my mouse again here, on the left, we may have an engineered solution where you calculate the lux levels and it gives you the number of light fittings, and you start and then you space them out. But what you don't realize is that if you throw a line to here, which you see physically, it's not parallel to the wall. So you may need to add in a light fixture or take off a light fixture or space them a bit differently, so that in the end, you get this as a line that is parallel to the wall. And when you see it, it looks like it has been studied. It looks like you have really integrated your lighting design with the actual architectural envelope. The other law is the law of equality. Now you can see here, there are dots and bars, but you automatically, in your mind, you know they're all the same dimensions. You don't think one is bigger than the other. You see them as equal. So that applies very much also to linear fixtures and downlights that we use in our daily work. We see them as equal. So we need to understand that and try to avoid having multiple functions, the multiple dimensions. We should keep it simple. This is another very important law that I'll use a lot. I don't see 9 dots. I see 3 groups of 3 dots. I don't see 6 bars. I see 3 groups of 2 bars. So by grouping these things together, I can simplify the clutter in the ceiling. Even if I need 12 downlights, as you can see on the top left, I could regroup them together and find a different solution that looks more calm, less cluttered, and I still have the same number of light fixtures. But because of mind does do this proximity thing, you can use that to simplify your design while you still use the same amount of light fixtures. Now let's look at how that can be used in finding a design solution. Let's say you have a building plan of 3 octagonal shapes, and you want to highlight the center of these shapes. There's a little square in each of those octagonal plans, and you want, with lighting, to emphasize the building, emphasize that central part. You can see on the left, I followed the law of continuity and equality, but in the left one, I have 5 light fixtures. In the one on the top, I've got only 2, and the one on the right, I've got 4. So if I regroup them together, still using the same light fixture, I could focus a bit better. I can make a differentiation of the 3 octagonal spaces, but I still don't have a real focus on that square in the middle of those octagons. Now, if I play around, there's actually another law called the law of dominant shape. But you can imagine by using these linear lights that I use on the right, I actually accentuate that square. And I also follow all the other laws, and it looks totally designed as being part of that shape. So what I'm trying to say is that with these laws, the way we perceive things as human beings, you can make use of that to make your design more appeasing, more logical. When people see spaces and they see lighting, they see, oh yeah, that looks like it belongs there. Really important. And these are tools that I've been using throughout my life as a lighting designer. Now, we have to deal also with things like color and material, shapes and forms. I think you all know that there's so many different material finishes, so many different colors, but we need to understand their properties. We need to understand whether it's reflective, whether it's absorbent, whether it's, diffusing. These are things that are key. And if you look at this picture here, you can see a multitude of those things in action. You can see a semi-transparent rattan screen. You can see this Chinese pot that is quite glossy, lacquer. There's a focus, there's some light in the distance. It plays with material, it plays with the direction of light, it plays with how everything comes together, and it allows you to really enjoy this view. Another element of the interaction with materials is also reflection. Now this is reflection through a water surface, but it could be a mirror, it could be anything that's reflective. But understanding the properties of reflections and how you can make use of that to amplify your project, to amplify your space or building, I think is very crucial. We made a very deliberate choice in this project to make sure that the water surfaces, which were quite a lot, were elementary in the whole process of design. There's deliberately no light in the water. The water acts as the mirror, as the reflection, and it brings out this sort of magical extra dimension that you wouldn't get otherwise. I remember one of my early jobs when I did the Lion restaurant in Shangri-La, Singapore. There were quite a lot of reflective materials, and at that time I was very anxious to make sure that I didn't want to create too many reflections and too much reflective glare. But the interior designer, Adam Tierney, at the time said, Martin, don't worry, that's part of life. You should embrace reflections. You know, in fact, we want to see reflections. I want you to emphasize that we have reflective materials. So don't be too scared to have light reflect of these materials. Just manipulate and manage it. So that was also a big learning lesson for me, that I should not always try to avoid things. Sometimes you can embrace it. Now we need to manage the qualities of light, okay? So for instance, the directionality of light. On the left, you see just bare battens that create some general lighting. The purpose is just to light up and people can do their shopping in this cheap supermarket. But in the middle, two pictures, you can see light has been controlled. There's optics and light has been directed to the actual displays, and there's less attraction to the ceiling. But a third way of doing it is to use light to actually direct you and play with architecture and give you visual guidance on where to go and how to move about. So you can play with the directionality of light to create different moods and ambiences as well. For instance, this can be very open, very general, but then when I focus, it becomes totally different. Same for this department store. It looks very general like that, but once I start focusing, it becomes a totally different experience. And I think that's one of the things that we need to understand as lighting designers, that we can play with the directionality of light to create moods and ambiences and atmospheres and experiences. What we should not forget is that we also need to make as much useful light, use as much useful light as possible. Light has a tendency also to have a very wide distribution. So you need to be able to control and understand how the light that comes out of a fixture will affect the surfaces that it's intended to light. Very often you find that the useful light is only a few, 10 or 20%, and that the rest of it is actually not really useful. Some of it can create glare, some of it can create trespass. So it's our task to manage that, and specifically manage the light pollution. And this older picture from Iguzini that was many years back. Some of you may still remember it. I thought was a really nice way to express light pollution by having this owl with his sunglasses. But we need to manage that. We need to be understanding how we can control the light against light pollution. Other elements, and I don't want to go really too deep into that, but I think you all know that we need to manage the quality of light in terms of color rendering, and specifically nowadays the color consistency in terms of color temperature. It's really important to understand that there's different qualities of LEDs. Today we have those with low binning and high binning qualities, and some of them create really a color inconsistency that we want to avoid. So managing that and understanding that is part and parcel of our job. I want to make a statement about color, because now that we are in the age of LED, we have the opportunities to use RGB, and more I see people use RGB really without any story, without any reason. Just because we can doesn't mean that we should use colored lighting. I think it has to be done with measure, and you need to have a story why you want to do it. I can only implore people to think hard about using colors. It's not really natural, and I feel that sometimes it's totally over the top and not necessary at all. Now, the psychology of light is another element that I would like to highlight as a very important part of how we apply lighting design. Lighting generally attracts. So you can understand if you have a light centrally in a room, or you have a light feature, people automatically bound together. They come around it. It attracts. But we can also play with light in terms of how it distributes in space. So for instance, here where light doesn't touch any of the walls, we don't have a real understanding of the space. It just lights up the floor and it may give you a direction of where to go, but it's just a simple downlight. But if I start washing the wall, in this case, the back wall, I get a totally different perception of that space. That space now looks longer and narrower because lighting attracts whatever I see looks bigger and further away. If I do the same on the side wall, suddenly I get a different impression of that same space. Suddenly this space becomes wider and shorter. Just by manipulating the direction of light, I get a totally different feel of exactly the same space. And if I have ceilings that are quite low, if I light it up, it will look higher. So we can play around with that. If we have narrow corridors or spaces with low ceilings, we can play with light to help the psychology of how we appreciate that space. The other thing that is important to note is that we are talking about light being very relative. You know, you reference what you see against what you just saw. So if you go from one space to another, you need to understand that your reference point is there where you came from. And if you look at this, we have here a white square against a black background, or a gray square against a white background. But I think you know what I'm going to say is that both are actually gray. It's just because there's a different background, a different reference frame, that you appreciate that differently. So we need to understand the relativity in what we are doing in relation to the spaces that we design. The other element is about making sure we can control light simply. I don't mind having a more sophisticated technology behind all those switches, but whenever you operate it, it should be simple to do, easy to understand. But we also need to realize that the world around us is changing. We're going from a wired to a wireless environment where we have even voice-controlled operations. This is something that we have to deal with, and is becoming more and more integral in what we are doing as a lighting designer. Then the element of energy management, putting light where and when you need it. Some of you, I'm sure are very much involved in energy saving and all that, and trying to reduce the carbon footprint. But this picture on the right, which is a Photoshop picture that I've been using a lot to try to exaggerate a bit the point, that yes, I can just use a follow spot for a soccer match, but it doesn't give you the mood and ambience, and it's probably very hard to follow. So there's a limit to what you can do in terms of energy efficiency. I was once asked by a green consultant and an architect whether I could reduce my energy footprint. And I said, yes, of course, if you want. I mean, I can even do you 0 watts per square meter. And he said, oh, really? Can you do that? I said, yes, of course I can, but you won't have any lights. So you need to understand and educate people that energy management has to be done in context. You need to understand how you do that. But it is our professional duty, I think, to manage energy consumption and make sure that we have a minimal carbon footprint. Now, looking at the invisible part of lighting. I call it invisible because it's the part that happens behind the stage, behind the screens, things that you don't see, things that we go through as a lighting designer, and things that we go through that are not necessarily apparent when you see the end product. One of that is sustainability. A lot of people think that sustainability is only about environment, it's only about watts per square meters. But that's not true. We need to balance sustainability with the social aspects of life and with the economic aspects of life. If I translate that into lighting elements, yes, we have to watch out for the watts per square meters. How can we save energy? How can we reduce light pollution as the environmental factors? And then we need to balance that against the budget and the capital expenditures and the operational costs to make sure that makes sense. And if we have those two, then we have the third element, which is the social element in terms of how do I create mood and ambiences, how do I manage my lighting levels, how do I create comfortable environments, and make sure that whatever I have designed is safe and secure in terms of operation. So sustainability is very much a balancing act between those three key components and not just energy saving. Another element is about technology. Some of you may not have been or have just been brought up in the era of LED technology. I started with just fluorescent tubes and incandescent bulbs. So I had a major shift happening 10, 15 years ago when I had to shift from conventional lighting technology to LED technology. Because what I thought I knew about lighting was totally thrown out of the window. I had to recalibrate myself totally and relearn lighting design in a way to understand what LED technology means in terms of lighting design outcomes and quality criteria. It was a big shift, and I think the older generation, and some of you maybe from this older generation that are listening in today, you will have gone through that shift of going from conventional lighting technology to LED technology. But we have to deal with it, and we have to understand how that allows you to do lighting design and allows you to do and create certain lighting effects. When I did the Petronas Twin Towers in the 90s, it was fully conventional lighting technologies. I had the opportunity to do another project across from there called IB Tower, which 20 years later was 100% LED technology, a total shift. I had to totally rethink the way I was approaching that, and that's the evolution of lighting technology over the years. Today, the evolution of the technology of LED lighting is very, very fast, probably comparable to the evolution of mobile phones. Every 6 months, there may be a new version on the market, which means that speed of development forces us to really think about what we are specifying, and we may need to revisit what we are specifying just before we actually purchase the lights, because between the time that you actually did the specification and the actual implementation, there may be 1 or 2 years in which there are new versions. So it requires a new positioning and new thinking about how we specify our light in this new age of LED and fast developing LED technology. It's even going to go much faster, and this will be a topic totally different, but as you understand, we are also moving towards a smart and connected world. We are developing our Lighting Design of Things platform that deals with that. But just like your mobile phone is bought not just because of the phone function, you buy a mobile phone because of the apps and the smart functions it have. The same is going to happen with lighting. In the future, we were not going to specify a light because of its lighting function. We're going to specify it because of the smart functions that it has. Now, something about managing costs. We always have to deal with what I call the sales cowboys. I had a story about the LED cowboys many years back when LED came about. These are vendors that basically do anything for a sale. And we as lighting designers have a very strong responsibility to our clients to educate them about what quality they're going to buy, what the value for money is. Yes, we do value engineering and all that, but we need to clear the woods in terms of what is good quality and what is value for money, because there's a lot of these sales cowboys around that are not interested in quality, but are interested at the sale only. And we have the professional duty to make sure that our client gets the best value for money. I like this picture quite a lot, even though it's a staged photo op, a marketing op for the bike manufacturer, in which they show that the quality of their bike is much better than a China-made car. But it sort of expresses the duality and the issues that we have at hand as lighting designers. We may have specified something and then we go through the whole value engineering process to make sure that we meet budgets. Generally, we do that quite early in the piece, by the way. But there is that need to create value for money. And we need to be able to explain that, to understand that, and clarify why something is better than something else. Some of you may have seen this also, very much part of our job. Our clients want everything good, cheap, and fast, but it's practically impossible to do that. So understanding that either you have good and cheap, fast and good, or cheap and fast, I think is part and parcel of our job to educate the client on how to achieve the desired end result. I think this is a very valid point to make anytime when you're talking about money. We also need to make sure when we talk about value for money to differentiate about the capital expenditures and operational expenditures. When we design, we don't design just for when we commission the project and then we wash our hands and we're off. Our projects in principle are made for the long run. So we have to make sure that we don't look just at having controlled capital expenses, installation costs, but also have very controlled and manageable operational costs to make sure that our clients have a proper return on their investment. We also have to look at availability, look at when we have global quality, perhaps against local suppliers and service. To me, the product is as good as the people behind it. So every time we do make a selection, we do look for products, we have to weigh global availability against local availability, and most of all, look at those people that will be servicing the project is as important, if not more important. Something that also people don't see when they see the end result is how much work went into site in terms of making sure that we have a good quality of workmanship. I can't tell you how often I've climbed up a ladder to look into a cove to see how they installed the linear lights. Look at how irregular some of the lights are when you come to site for the first time, and time and again, there's an education process also for the contractors to make sure that they do a proper job. It's something that you don't necessarily see, but it's something that is part and parcel of our work to supervise that everything is installed properly. Of course, I said I'm not interested in lux levels. That's of course not totally true. We do check lighting levels. We do check our international standards. It's all part and parcel of what we do. But it's more a means to an end. We're using it to make sure that we comply with operator manuals, with application guidelines, with standards that apply. These are things that are quite critical. But we use it afterwards. We have to make sure that we create the mood and ambience that we want. Finally, health and safety. There's a big push nowadays for natural lighting or reproducing natural daylight, specifically because a lot of people spend a lot of time indoors, and if we can replicate natural daylight, this is something that is good for our circadian rhythms, our body clock. We do that also to fight jet lag sometimes. So there's a lot of applications for human-centric lighting, as some people call it. But it has to be done with expertise. It's not just a gimmick, a gadget. Oh, I've got tunable white light, I can do warm and cool light. No, it needs to be done with sense, with a story, with understanding of what this light for health means, and it requires quite some study and understanding. It's not just playing with tunable light. This also is obvious. We have to make sure that people can walk around safely, can find their ways, people can recognize themselves, and make sure that we don't trip about any hazards. Finally, to round up, I've got one more slide to round up. So Teamwork is at the heart of what we do. We don't exist by ourselves. I already said it in one of the earlier slides. If you look at the playing field where we operate as lighting designers, we have a direct link with our client most of the time. And our client is only interested in time and money. They want to have things done as quickly as possible for the least possible money. And we provide our knowledge and expertise to support that. But we work as a team with other people. We have the designers, architects, interior designers, electrical engineers, whoever is in the design team. We need to coordinate and make sure that we are on the same page. We have environmental regulations, rules, standards, guidelines that we need to follow. That all is part of what we do. We have on the other side, on site, we have the contractor who's going to build and install what you have designed and the manufacturers that are going to supply. All of that needs to be in tune. We need to make sure that everybody understands what you're doing. So communication is, I think, key to all that and key to teamwork. Lighting design is not a standalone thing. It's part of a bigger and larger process that I would like to call teamwork. We are just an element in the whole chain. And we have to make sure everything works smoothly. So that brings me to the end of my 45 slightly more minutes presentation. What I wanted to part with is that those who aspire to become lighting designers, or those who are already designers, I think it's important to find somehow your own identity. And I think you get that by growing, by learning from the world around you. There may be people that you look up to that can guide you in doing that. And if I've provided some inspiration and motivation today, then that would make me really happy. So thank you for that. Just to the commercial part before we go through the question and answers. We have lined up 6 modules that will start on the 27th of June in 2 weeks' time. And every week you will get something like I've done today, but then in much more detail and peppered with much more personal experiences directly, how I've dealt with clients and all that. It's a 6-week course. The modules, you just saw the first introductory model to give you sort of a background on what I'm going to talk about. But in the second module, I will move into looking at the differences between creative and engineered lighting solutions. In the third module, I will look at the actual processes of lighting design. I will lead you through step by step, which will then accumulate into the fourth module, looking at key considerations that are really critical in coming to good lighting design from start to finish. In the fifth module, I'll talk about communication, visualization techniques. How do I present to my clients? What do I do to convince them? And in the sixth module, I'm talking about lighting design as a business. Most of us who have come into lighting design never learned about lighting design as a commercial entity. I certainly didn't. And many people that are creative people are not necessarily business people. So I think that will be a very illuminating module. And I will round up those 6 modules with sort of directions on what it will take to become a great lighting designer. So what is this course going to cost? Understand that you will be able to get a 50% discount if you register today at $125 US. The link, if you do it next week, it will go up to $150, is my understanding. And if you want to know how to register, you can go to www.bit.ly/lighttalks. I think it's somewhere in your chat box. You will find the exact link to do that. So that's it for me. We'll go from to take some questions and answers. And I think, Supriya, you may have
Martin. Okay, to add on to what Martin said, I would just, because a lot of people were asking me, can we access the presentation? So if you enroll for the classes, then you will get access to all the presentations and all the recorded sessions. for a duration of 6 weeks. Basically, till the completion of the course, you will be able to access all the content online. So
Yeah.
that answers the questions. So Martin, we'll begin with the Q&A session now because
Okay, I wanted to add in one more thing, is that
Yes.
those who enroll, I think I forgot to mention that, will be able to download and get access to my 2 books as a soft copy. We will make a link available so that you can download my Light Talk 1 and Light Talk 2 books for further reading.
Okay. Great, Martin. So we'll move on to the Q&A section now.
Okay.
I think you can also see the questions on the screen. So let's take them up one by one.
Okay. Which is the first one? I have a lot.
Okay, somebody from Singapore. He's
Okay.
saying hi to you.
Yeah. Okay. Hi back, June. Nice to see you there. The next question is from Shreya. Calculation of light required per room or per area. That's a very general question. I mean, you can calculate per room or per area. You need to understand what you're calculating. You're not calculating. You have to look at the relevant area if you do calculations. I don't have to have 100 lux in the corner of a room. I need 100 lux on my desk, for argument's sake. So you need to look at the relevant area, and that's how you approach lighting calculations. I see a question about in the commercial space from Koja. Is it not necessary to measure lux level? Yes, I think it's always necessary to measure lux levels. But I think as a professional lighting designer, the more you do lighting design, the more you know that if you put a number of lights that you will achieve certain lighting levels, and then you double check it. I very much do check whether we achieve lighting levels, but it's not the first requirement. As I said, you first need to understand what you want to achieve in that space, and then you can double check to make sure that you comply with the lighting levels. How much does lighting design cost per square feet? I wouldn't know, because that really varies from application to application. So if there's a dedicated application, we could possibly go deeper into that, and then you need to specify what needs to be included, just the fitting, the supplies, the installation. There's so many variables that it's probably quite complicated to come to a proper answer for that.
Okay, Martin, let's take up this question from Prateek from Noida. He's asking, what is the best possible way or solution to provide technically correct lighting design within the budget or client expectations? Okay.
Now, of course, that's a very good and critical question, because as I said in my presentation, everything revolves about money, okay? So your client will sometimes give you a budget to work with, sometimes not. Most of the time, they are very reluctant to give you a budget because they don't think that you will maximize that budget out and try to create a design that fits the budget, if that's a royal budget. So once you do the design, we don't really start with a budget. It's of course good to understand if there's a direction in terms of budget, but we do our concept design. But straight away after we have done our concept, we try to tabulate a cost to it. So you need to first let your creativity do the work. Come out with a concept and not be bothered too much by the cost at that stage, because you may limit yourself in your creative ideas and solutions. So you go ahead, you create a concept, but then you double check with by sort of tabulating roughly the amount of products and systems that you need to get a bit of an idea and a fix of the budget. And then you share that with the client. And if the client, for argument's sake, said to you, I've got $200,000, and you come out to 250,000, then there is room to discuss. If you come out to 500,000 and your company and your client's budget is 200,000, then obviously you have a problem. Then you need to see what is it that you can do. Is that budget realistic, or is that budget totally out of proportion? So That's how I approach lighting design in terms of trying to meet budgets. The question also asked client expectations. Very often, clients are driven by their QS, their quantity surveyor, who gives them budget indications that are not always driven by the proper components and proper elements. I did once a hotel project on a resort island, and the reference cost was for a similar property in the middle of a city. Not thinking that it was a remote island, things has to go by boat, it's much more complicated to bring supplies there. So it's very much also whether the QS understands what's necessary, and sometimes QS also base themselves on lux level calculations, and they say, oh, I need only this or that. So you always have a little challenge there to make sure that you're talking about the right budget expectations. I hope that that answers the question.
Yeah, I hope so. Okay, so next question is from Omkar. He's asking, how do you visualize lighting system before actually putting them in a space? Like we have softwares for 3D models. So how do we do it?
Yes, well, that's my module 5, I think. I'm going to go into these details, how to do that. There's various technologies. You can just use Photoshop, or you can use SketchUp. There's many different models. You can do actual calculations using photometric data to represent how it's going to look like. But that will be one of my modules. I think it's module 5, in which I'm going to go very much into detail on how to do that.
Okay. So next question from Pankaj Kumar. He is asking, what is the difference between CRI and RA? CCT reflection is changed with 2-time production products by fixtures and LED CCT coordinates. What is the solution for controlling CCT of products?
Okay, so that can be quite a long question, but basically CRI and RA are sort of the same. CRI is the color rendering index, and RA is another term that refers to the color rendering capabilities of a light source, right? The color temperature, or CT, relates to where the color sits on the black body locus in terms of its color temperature. So color rendering really has to do with the ability to render colors. If you take daylight as being 100% as a reference, most of today's LED products have 80 to 90% rendering capabilities. This probably 95 is probably about the highest I've seen, 95, 96, around there. But so it's the ability to render colors, and I think it will probably take another training course to talk about that, and there's quite a lot of them available. The point being that different applications may need different approaches. If I have a back of house area, the color qualities may not be as important as in the public areas or offices or retail. So you need to look at where am I applying. It's not so much the technology or the theory. You need to understand where am I going to use it and what is the best for my application. So in terms of color temperature, I mentioned in my earlier slide that people have different expectations. Some people appreciate a warmer color, which has nothing to do with color rendering, by the way. It's a different, it's the color of the light itself. And some people prefer a cooler temperature. So this is also a psychological element in the lighting design path.
Okay, great, Martin. Next question is from Yashwant Thakur. He's asking, what would your advice be for highly air polluted environment around a monument building for lighting? Do we use high power lights or manage the color temperature of the light or use focused lights?
Highly polluted environment. This is a question from India.
Yes.
Yeah. So I know there's a lot of, but I must say under this current COVID-19 situation, the air has cleared up a lot. But to be quite honest, I don't think I've really designed with having in mind the air pollution. The only thing is that light, you don't see light, you see light reflected off surfaces, but you also see light reflected off particles. In other words, when you shine light into a cloud or smoke or polluted air, you will see the beam, right? So that's inherent at the typical, say, technology that you want to use. I wouldn't use a narrow beam or wide beam driven by air pollution. I would use it depending on what I need for that particular building in terms to validate that buildings to the best of my ability. And if that comes, I mean, if you go to a rock concert, you will see lights coming from all directions, and the smoke, the machines will show the beam types. Well, if that's what happened in an air polluted environment, that's what it is. I don't think I would change my approach for lighting up a building just because of air pollution.
Okay. Next question from Nikhil. Is my voice okay, Martin? Is it echoing?
I can hear you, yeah.
Okay.
I just lost you where you are in the questionnaire, but yeah, okay. Just go ahead.
Yeah. So he's asking, as an amateur lighting designer, what could be a good resource to get started with LED technology? We generally don't find any resource to get started with LED lighting engineering. So he's asking what could be a good resource if we want to work on LED technology.
To learn the LED technology or to learn lighting design?
Yeah, no, LED lighting engineering he's asking.
Well, I'm not much of a technology buff, to be honest. I'm a creative person, so I have to rely on the technology experts to tell me. I take a product as it is. I look at the light that comes from it, look at the light distribution. We have a rule in our company, in our office, that we generally do not specify any light if we haven't had it in our hands and have played with it, so that we understand how light is actually coming out of the light fixture and what I can do with it, what is the projected effect. So whatever light fitting or technology is being used, to me as a creative person, is somehow secondary. I need to take the product as it is, what light it produces. I mean, I understand, of course, a bit of the technology, but it depends again of your background. If you have an engineered background, you may want to understand more about the lighting technology and the LED technology. But I'm probably the wrong person to ask about all these technological things, because I'm someone who is very visual. I take the lighting effects as they are and I try to play around with it.
Great. Martin, just a little announcement, because a lot of people they have started paying. So we just want to tell everybody that if you have paid, then just type paid in the chat box so that we'll be able to track all the registrations. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Okay, so next question is from Varsha. She's asking, how can we promote education in lighting in India for designers and lighting professionals, including lighting advisors in the retail segment? So I think she can join our course as well.
Yeah, so this is about education, basically. So, I mean, there's quite a number of events in India, obviously, around the world, actually, that well, there used to be, before COVID-19, there used to be a lot of exhibitions and lighting fairs and things like that, where you can educate yourself, where there are seminars. Right now, today, we're looking at about webinars. There are dedicated webinars. If you search the net, you will find very dedicated presentations from various vendors, but also from various lighting designers groups that promote certain applications, lighting expertise for certain areas. In my modules later on, I will be more general. I will touch on various applications, but I'm not going to go That's probably something for the future where I may go into actual specific applications, whether it's retail or hospitality or corporate lighting applications. But there are platforms where you can find more information about specific application areas.
Okay. I hope that question is answered.
Anyhow, I'm happy to reply also personal questions later on. People can send the emails to you, and then we can individually reply to those people to the best of our knowledge.
Yes, they can do that as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll take a few more questions. Alex is asking, with smart devices and connectivity being a buzzword, how would you advise clients who want to have a lot of functionality built in that are not necessary for the project and make things more complicated than needed?
Right, that sounds like a very loaded question, because we are moving into the age of smart and IoT. And some of you may be aware that I am developing this lighting design of things platform, where we look at things beyond lighting design, things that are related to smart functions. There is an increased demand right now to move into smart functions. Some of them have nothing to do with lighting at all. We are doing a project at the moment, and we were going through the cost of lighting controls recently, and we found out that half of the costs that were in the controls equipment had actually nothing to do with lighting. Some were just for air conditioning, for presence detection, for temperature measurements, all kind of things. Even air quality measurements, that had nothing to do with the actual function of lighting controls. So what you see happening right now is that there is a drive towards multiple functionalities into smart systems, and then you see smart systems being integrated into lighting systems. That's the part that we are tackling as lighting designers of things, where we look at the multiple functions that are being integrated, multiple smart functions that are being integrated in lighting, because lighting is in every space. So it makes logical sense to use lighting and lighting points as a hub for smart and IoT-driven data systems. Right?
Okay. Next question from Meghna. She's asking, what is impulse purchasing when it comes to retail lighting?
Impulse purchasing, I think I have to ask my wife. Because impulse, I mean, I think I have to relate it to lighting, right? So
yeah.
The way we design lighting for retail is to focus your attention on promotional displays, to focus your attention on where the products and services are being laid out for you as a consumer. So when you design lighting, it's also important to attract you inside a shop. So the whole routing, the way people are led through a shop, is also integral to the way lighting design is being done. You want people to go inside the shop. So it starts with the shop window perhaps, and once you go through the door, the lighting draws you further into the shop. Your eye is being drawn to the shelvings, to the displays by focused lighting. It's not about where you walk, it's about where the products are that are being displayed. And if it's drawn through your eye to visual merchandising, through proper lighting. Visual merchandising is the technique where you show people what you can do with a product. If you have a wine glass, show it next to a bottle with some wine in it, right? Then you understand what that glass is for. If you have tropical clothing, you show it on a sandy beach, so to speak. So it creates imagination on where you can use your products and why you would like to buy it. And that's very often how we stimulate impulse buying.
Great. Next question from Abhijit. He's asking, is vertical lux level important to measure, calculate, and design in residential applications? Vertical red fluxing.
Yeah, so the vertical illuminance is something that is quite important, yes. As you have understood, I'm not a great lux fanatic, but I do appreciate that these calculations are important, not only what happens on a horizontal level, but also on a vertical level. And the vertical illumination, to be able to see faces, to be able to illuminate properly, even if it's for facial recognition, is something that plays a role in neighborhood securities as well. So my answer would be yes, it's important not only to design for horizontal lighting levels, but also for vertical lighting levels.
Okay, Rajesh has a question. He's asking, can a person who is not in the lighting field do this course? Like, is the course good for a person who is not in the lighting field?
Sorry, can you repeat that question?
He's asking about the course. He's saying that a person who is not in the lighting field, is the course relevant for them as well?
Depends on their affinity to lighting. I mean, if it's just out of interest or whether they want to do something with lighting. I mean, if you want to follow the course that I assume that they're referring to the 6 modules that are coming up, I can only encourage people that are somehow related to lighting and to the lighting industry and the lighting design industry, if they are interested to have a better understanding of what lighting design means, what lighting design can do. And even if they are sideways, even as a potential client, I would think that understanding the process of lighting design, understanding how people come to their decisions to create good lighting design will be very helpful. It can also be just a general interest subject. I don't know what drives people to lighting. I never knew I would be going into lighting until I actually was in it, you know?
Okay, I hope your question is answered. Okay, next question from Manish. He's asking, what is a UGR in lighting and how should we apply the same while designing the space?
Okay, so UGR is about the glare rating index, and it tells you how glary a light fixture is. So it takes an observer point in space and it looks at the light fitting, and then it calculates, just in simple terms, how glary the light is, how bright the light is that you can see. So you can design for certain UGR levels. Certain spaces require a very controlled glare index, and other are less important. We come across this quite regularly. Most lighting manufacturers will provide you with the UGR index of their light fixtures, so it tells you that at certain angles the light is very well controlled. It's important. I talked about the importance of controlling glare and things like that, light pollution. So understanding what the UGR value of a light fixture is important, and I think should be considered. And reputable manufacturers all have that information available for you. You can put that in lighting calculation programs to figure out from various positions in space how glary a light fixture is. And if you have tilted it too much or you have oriented in a wrong way, it will tell you, and it will help you in design an installation that is as comfortable as possible.
Okay. Next question from Anand Sampath. He has a question on relativity, how to use in outdoor lighting. I hope you get the question.
Relativity?
Yeah. How to use relativity in outdoor lighting, I think.
Well, you need to understand, I mean, it's the same for indoor, outdoor. You need to understand how we appreciate and experience lighting. So I showed a picture of a tunnel. That's a typical example of relativity, because once you drive into a tunnel, you have this adaptation lighting. So it helps you to mitigate the differences between the bright environment that you come from, which could be sunshine or a bright day, and you go into a tunnel, it would be a black hole if the lighting was not properly done, not done properly. That's the relativity that we're trying to mitigate as lighting designers. That's typically when you go in or out of a tunnel, for instance. But there's also spaces when you come out of a building and you come outdoor. You need to somehow be able to adapt with your eyes. Your eyes have a certain timing they need to adapt to a lighting situation. It's not instant. For instance, people that fly airplanes and other modes of transport, often at night they have red colored dials because the adaptation from red to dark is the easiest for your eyes. So there's many different aspects to that relativity in terms of lighting design. You need to understand, what are you talking about? Am I talking about driving on a highway and going into a park or a residential neighborhood? Am I talking about a big city plaza and talking about going to a back street or into a park? We need to understand, and we need to understand what we have designed in one area, what we're designing in another area, and how the transition takes place in terms of lighting levels, colors, intensities, directions, etc.
Next question from Ria. Ria has a question about the course. She's asking, is this course suitable for beginners, those who are not lighting designers or interior designers by profession?
My simple answer is yes, because the way I talk about it is not technical. You have seen today is very visual. I'm not a person of formulas and definitions and things like that. I talk straight away from my experience in a way and in a method that everybody can very easily understand. I think there's enough in it for people that are beginners as much as there is for people that are more experienced. For those that are experienced, they will probably take away other things. For those that are beginners, they will understand what it takes to be a lighting designer, what it takes to work with clients and project team members. So my answer would be yes, it's suitable for all ages, so to speak, for all backgrounds, for all, because the way I'm presenting it is very simple and straightforward, and I think everybody can understand what I'll be talking about.
Next question is from Ashley. Ashley is asking, for landscape and facade lighting, are there any norms that you follow to optimize the lighting levels and lighting design used? Could you suggest any particular case study for the same?
Yeah, again, it depends really on the actual situation. Where is that landscape? Is it in the city? Is it a courtyard in a building? It really depends. I don't have set rules. I have, of course, built up over the years. I've built up my way of approaching things. But generally, every project is new. Every project you start from the beginning and you look, okay, what is the design brief? What is it that I'm dealing with? Is it something new? Is it something, see, if it's an existing landscape, I'm dealing probably with mature landscape. If it's something new, I may have landscape that's fresh from the nursery and has a totally different feel. There's so many variables in potential lighting design that there's no way I can give a straight answer and solution just like this. I would need to have much more details in terms of giving an approach, but you need to take each project and look at it. What are the parameters that define this project? What are the key considerations? And all these key considerations are the ones that I'm going to go through in my modules that are going to follow after this, where I look at all these points. What is it that I need to think of in order to deliver a good design? It's not something that I can just answer like that in 3 lines.
Right. Okay. So Martin, would you like to look at the Q&A section? Like if there are some questions which you think are relevant, you can take them up.
Let me have a look. Okay, I see a question here about dynamic lighting design. What is my take on that? It's an interesting question because lighting indeed nowadays has the opportunity to become dynamic. We have sensors, we have controls, we have technology that is made to become dynamic if we want to. We recently completed a hotel in China where we actually included a light show as part of the hotel experience. It is a hotel that is built in a square with a big courtyard in the middle, and all the public spaces that are surrounding that courtyard are part of a dynamic light show every hour of the day, at night, obviously. So there's a big opportunity to use dynamic lighting, but in the same way as I told before that you shouldn't use colored lighting just because you can, the same holds for dynamic lighting. Just because we can do dynamic lighting with today's technology very easily, it doesn't mean that we have to do it always. We need to have a really good reason and a really good conceptual statement that supports using dynamic lighting in a specific architectural environment. But I think it enriches the opportunities that we have. Dynamic could even be dimmable light or tunable light. Static, if I take that static is just on or off, dynamic could mean a lot of things. And I think it can certainly enrich the opportunities that we have as designers to create different concepts. And so I certainly support dynamic lighting, but as I said before, with a lot of reason and a lot of thought. Let me see if there's some other questions. Okay, now there is one question I see here from Priya Gupta about reproducing natural daylight. Now that's something that's quite close to my heart also at the moment. We are entering the post-COVID-19 world where there's a lot of demand that will be coming to lighting designers to change the way we approach our lighting design. There's a new world out there, and one of the things that we can feel already is coming through the requests we're getting from the industry is to more and more look at create, and when I say natural light, I'm thinking of healthy lighting. There's a lot of demand now to recreate natural daylight in spaces where there's not that much daylight. People spend a lot of time at home. And certainly now with COVID-19, there's this added stay-at-home element where people are less exposed, even more than before, to natural daylight. And natural daylight is a very elementary part of our biorhythms and how we get ourselves to remain healthy and motivated. So there is this possibility now with the technology that is available to recreate natural daylight. There's different levels of sophistication. I mentioned about tunable light, where we play with the colors of light that you can find outside in nature, from warm sunset light to bright midday daylight. But there is also the ability to actually reproduce the movement of the sun, the movement of the clouds, and do things like that. It's getting more and more sophisticated. And basically, we are now entering an age where we can basically reproduce whatever is happening outside in terms of all its variations, also inside. And it's something that I'm studying very hard on, and we have a few pilot projects where we're looking into introducing that. But it's certainly something that is worth studying, worth looking at as part of lighting design. Let me see if there's some other questions.
Martin, there is this question from Rasu Rao. I was checking the chat box, so I found it here. He's asking, what is the optimum CRI to avoid interference with animals? Example, the famous Gorgon effect on turtles in Australia.
The optimal CRI to?
Avoid interference with animals.
I don't really understand the question. the color rendering index in relation to animals?
I think so, yes. Basically, to avoid interference with animals, he's talking about some Gorgon effect on turtles in Australia. So
Okay,
basically,
so
the effect of
yeah,
CRI
it's
on
not
animals.
yeah, it's not actually CRI. It's about color temperature. If you talk about the impact of light, intensity of light, and the color of the light towards, for instance, turtle breeding. So in terms of disturbance of natural habitats, there's a lot of studies that have been done, and we were involved in one project a couple of years ago and did a study on the impact of lighting intensity and the color of the light towards turtle breeding. And we found that colors that are above 600, I think it was 630 nanometers or something like that, didn't have any impact. You see, turtles, when they breed on the beach, they need to be able to go back and find the sea. But if they are disturbed by light and brightness, they're disoriented and then they can't find the sea. There are several studies that points out what sort of color temperature you should use to not disturb natural habitat, and in this case, turtle breeding. We could go into this with this particular person in more detail if necessary, but it requires study, and different animals will have different peak intensities that they react to. So that really depends also on the animals.
Okay. One question from Ayushi. She's asking, what are the lighting considerations for using lighting in small spaces to make them look bigger using light, specifically in residences?
Right. Well, I mentioned some of my general principles that if you light up a wall, it will look further away. So you can make use of lighting to enlarge the space psychologically. I mean, like, it will look bigger even though the physical measurements don't change. There is no one solution for what she's asking. Or he, I don't remember he or she, but the point, yeah. So the point is that there is not one solution, right? I think that's one of the things that I made clear also in my presentation, is that you have to understand that there's multiple solutions, and people may find many different ways that pleases them to resolve a lighting challenge. So I can't give her a solution. I would have to look at how she experiences or how the space is being experienced, what the space is used for. We would have to have a chat first, and then I'll probably be able to come up with a very dedicated solution. Once I see it, it's probably quite easy to give a solution, but otherwise there's multiple answers to this.
Okay, Martin, we'll just take one or two more questions and then we'll wrap up the session because there's little time left.
Sure.
Yeah, so if you want, you can just go through the Q&A box and find some of the relevant ones.
Let me go a bit towards the end. Lighting design software will be dealt with in the modules. Lux level, no, we don't need that. Keep mind doing lives or heritage build. Okay, so here's one about heritage buildings from Nikita in Melbourne, Australia. Thanks for joining, by the way. I don't know if this person is still here. But heritage buildings is a very specific application because very often the fabric of the building is protected. You can't just put a light fixture to the building because it's all protected according to heritage guidelines and heritage values. So we have done quite a number of heritage buildings. And one of the biggest challenges in terms of doing heritage buildings is that you need to really validate those heritage values. You cannot touch them. You need to think on how you can integrate new technology in sometimes an environment that is of heritage value. That means you may look at it and you see heritage. We have done a couple of heritage projects where we salvaged old light fixtures that used to be there, and we reconditioned them, but with new technology. So you wouldn't see there's an LED light in there, but that's one of the challenges that you have, is trying to recondition either, well, a heritage project by nature is an existing building. So you need to see how you can incorporate the latest technology, the latest lighting techniques without really affecting the heritage fabric of that building. So it's a really challenging thing to do. But we've got a couple of these projects, and I always love to do these because most of the time these buildings have a lot of nice features. Heritage buildings by nature are very interesting, and I find it really gratifying to work on heritage projects. So let me take one more question then.
Yeah, one last question.
Let me see. There's so many questions there.
I think you can answer this question. What inspires you every day the most about your work?
Yeah, okay. I think it sounds like a great question to end.
Yeah.
So what inspires me? I've got this little thing here. I don't know what you can see. It says "Stay inspired," right? So it's very crucial for me to indeed stay inspired. I've been in this business for 40 years, more even, since '79, and I can tell you, every day I still get up with excitement and looking forward to the day that's coming. We live in a time that's even more challenging now with COVID-19. But the interesting thing about lighting design is that we always are challenged on different levels. It's not a boring type of practice or discipline. Every day can be different. Every client can be different. Every project can be different. I've had the luxury of being able to travel all around the world and meet different cultures, different clients, different geographical locations of my projects. And what inspires me is what I learn from the people that I work with. Every time I come across people that bring something new into my life because they have been doing something that I never was aware existed, or I never was aware that that could be done. So inspiration is also driven by you being open for opportunities, by you being open to take in other people's thoughts, other people's thinking, and other people's way of doing things. I think if you are open and you are able to connect with people, you can learn so much that every day you will find something that inspires you. It's hard to describe, but you have to open up yourself to be inspired and to be motivated by things that other people do. It's not so that because you have not invented it, it's not part of your life. On the contrary, I think there's so many things happening, even today in this COVID-19 era that we are entering. I'm very much inspired by the opportunities that are ahead of us. Just because we can't do the lighting design the way we used to do it, and we will need to adapt and change and recalibrate, doesn't mean that there are opportunities. It doesn't mean that you can't do your profession. On the contrary, I'm still as excited as I was before COVID-19 because there's still heaps of opportunities in there. But it's a mindset. You need to be open to take in what's happening around you and look at it. What can I do? What can I contribute? And how can I support this world with the lighting knowledge and the lighting design expertise that I have? And I think that's what driving me and motivates me every day.
Great, Martin. Thank you so much. The session was really informative, and I am sure that a lot of people are looking forward to the sessions, upcoming sessions as well. So to end the session, like I'll just say here that the special offer is valid only for today. So all of you who haven't registered yet, you can do it now, like by till the time the day ends. So you'll get the special offer, because tomorrow onwards the fee is going to increase. So it's the best if you want to learn from Martin and get all that he has, the knowledge that he has from the last 40 years of experience. so you can get it now. So enroll for the course today. Martin, do you have anything else to share?
No, first, I would like to thank everybody who took out the time today. I saw at one point of time there's way over 300 people that joined, and it's really gratifying to know that so many people took out time to come and listen to me. I'm a very humble person, and I think it's very grateful to me that so many people took out the time to listen to me. So thank you for all that. Thank you for all the people that maybe woke up early or stayed up later to listen. Thank you for that. And I really hope that I have somehow inspired somebody or motivated somebody in the lighting design industry or industry related to lighting. And I do hope that I will see some of them return for the rest of the modules in the coming weeks. So thank you everybody for joining.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you to all the attendees and panelists. Thank you, everyone. We'll be ending the session now.
All right. Thanks, everyone.